Good evening, everyone. I now call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 14 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology. Pursuant to the order of reference of Saturday, April 11th, the committee is meeting for the purpose of receiving evidence concerning matters related to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting is taking place by video conference and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. I'd like to remind the witnesses and the members, before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, please unmute your microphone and then return to mute when you are finished. Please speak slowly and clearly so that the translators can do their work. And as is my normal practice, I will hold up a yellow card for when you have 30 seconds left in your intervention and a red card for when your time for questions has expired. I will now like to welcome our witnesses. We have with us this evening the Honourable Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Canadian Heritage, the Honourable Mariam Monsef, Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Rural Economic Development, and from the Department of Canadian Heritage, Hélène Laurendeau, the Deputy Minister. From the Department of Industry, we have Simon Kennedy, Deputy Minister, and Paul Thompson, Associate Deputy Minister. Each minister will have 10 minutes to present, followed by our rounds of questioning. So we will start with Minister Monsef. You have 10 minutes. Minister Monsef, you're on mute.
Thank you, Chair. Bonjour, Anin, salam alaikum. I hope you are safe. I hope you are well in whichever corner of this great country you find yourselves in. I'm pleased to join you live from the basement of my home in my community of Peterborough-Kawartha, a mixed rural-urban riding. Like many Canadians, including you, I'm adjusting to a different work and home reality. Like you, I'm thankful to our public health experts, our frontline workers, community leaders, innovators who are helping us adapt and cope, and for our neighbors who care for each other in these times. I'm thankful to the PSWs and the early childhood educators, the technicians, nurses, midwives, and doctors, and grocery store clerks, women's organizations who are putting everything on the line to keep the rest of us safe. Many thanks to my own team, and of course to our IT essential workers. Unlike millions of Canadians, though, I don't have little ones running around all day to care for and to nurture since daycares and schools are closed. It's hard on many parents, as it is for the children. Like my niece Ilya, who will celebrate her 4th birthday in 2 weeks, I miss hugging my loved ones and I want the coronavirus to, quote, go away. Like my niece Ilya, and like my niece Layla, who will turn 11 next month. I miss my friends and I want to return to when I can see them regularly in person. Like 86% of Canadians, I benefit from access to high-speed internet. But in some parts of Peterborough-Kawartha and in many other ridings across the country, access to high-speed internet is limited. Under the program Connect to Innovate, our government's approved projects that will connect close to 400,000 households to high-speed internet. But the job is not yet complete. I want Canadians to know that in addition to the immediate work we're undertaking to support them through these challenging times, we remain focused on ensuring access to high-speed internet for the 2 million Canadians who don't have that access today. In fact, COVID-19 has added greater urgency to this important work. I'm here today to discuss our government's plan for connecting more Canadians to high-speed internet, what we've learned from previous programs, and to assure Canadians that we are on it. Our government's committed to connecting all Canadians to broadband by 2030, and we've created the conditions to get this done. Our plan, the first of its kind for Canada, was developed in partnership with Canadians across the country. It includes a $6 billion incentive for private sector investments. And to ensure the success of this plan, we established a minister responsible for rural economic development and the Center for Rural Economic Development to coordinate the work across federal government with our partners in provinces, territories, individual communities, Indigenous partners, and within the private sector. Our plan is working. Our Connect to Innovate programs investing $585 million to connect close to 400,000 households across 975 communities. We designed the program to be accessible to different types of internet service providers. 1/3 of the funding has gone to the big three telcos, with 1/3 to smaller providers and another third for Indigenous-led organizations. Connect to Innovate projects have already brought high-speed internet to 25,000 households. Over 50,000 households across 150 communities that don't currently have high-speed internet will have access by the end of this year. By the end of next year, over 250,000 households that don't currently have access to high-speed internet will. That's across 750 communities. By 2022, close to 400,000 households across 972 communities that today have no access to high-speed internet will be connected with a baseline speed of 50/10 or better. That includes 190 Indigenous communities. These results only speak to the investments made through Connect to Innovate program. They don't include households and communities that will be connected through funding delivered by the CRTC, through the low Earth orbit satellite funding, or because of additional investments made via the Canada Infrastructure Bank or other federal programs. The new $1 billion Universal Broadband Fund will build on this success, coordinate programs, and connect more Canadians to high-speed internet. We've learned from Connect to Innovate, and we build on that knowledge in our design of the new Universal Broadband Fund. For example, the hexagon model to track and map connectivity across the country is no more. We now have the ability to track household connectivity status to within 250 meters. Greater precision will allow applicants to submit more targeted projects and connect underserved Canadians. You can see this for yourself through our new broadband connectivity map at canada.ca/getconnected. Earlier this year, Minister Baines announced that we're setting aside spectrum for smaller communities and ISPs in the upcoming spectrum auction. 50 megahertz of spectrum will be carved out for small and regional telecom companies to support higher speeds, increased data usage, and new applications. This will encourage competition in the wireless market and ensure companies are on a more equal footing with the big three national carriers. We're pursuing innovative partnerships to connect more Canadians to high-speed internet faster. Through the $750 million fund provided through the CRTC, we'll focus on delivering high-speed backbone along major roadways. Through a partnership with Telesat, our government's investing up to $600 million to provide satellite-based high-speed internet to some of Canada's hardest-to-reach households in remote and northern communities. Funding available through the Infrastructure Bank, Infrastructure Canada, Indigenous Services Canada will further leverage investments, bringing additional partners to the table. Colleagues, I've shared with you what we're doing. Let me address why we're doing it. What motivates me and what motivates our government is a fundamental belief that the rights enjoyed by Canadians should not be defined by geography. Canadians in rural and remote parts of our country need to have the same opportunities to access government and private sector services as Canadians who live in larger centres. Providing Canadians with access to high-speed internet will help close gaps caused by geography and increase equality of access to health, education, and employment in a digital economy. It will help us build better as we recover from COVID. Building this ribbon of fiber is the modern-day equivalent of the ribbon of steel that Sir John A. Macdonald built to stitch our country together. We realized that national dream with the completion of the Canadian Pacific Railway in 1885, and it seems in 2020 that we are united with a renewed national vision for universal access to high-speed internet. Like the building of the railroad, partnerships are needed to accomplish this task, but make no mistake, we believe in the role of government to lead Canadians in this effort. Now is not the time for low ambition and absolution of responsibility. Now is the time for government to invest in our collective recovery, to future-proof and be ready for new technology, to bridge the rural-urban divide, and to connect all Canadians. Colleagues, we've had a plan, and now because of COVID, it's even more urgent that we proceed quickly. I want to assure Canadians that we get it, that we're on it, and we will work with every willing partner to achieve our shared goals. Thank you, colleagues, and Chair Romanado, back to you for further discussion.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you very much, Minister. Our next witness is Minister Guilbeault. You have 10 minutes. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee. I have the honour of following the nice words that were spoken by my colleague, Myriam Monset. I'm speaking to you from Gatineau, the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. I'm delighted to join you virtually, to see you all, each in different corners of our beautiful country. And I wish to recognize the important and essential work that you are all doing, even through the current circumstances in Parliament and committees. We are all doing our best to get through COVID-19 and the pandemic, and it's important that we join forces and work together for the benefit of Canadians. This, of course, includes culture, heritage, and sport. Organizations in these three sectors are a vital part of the social fabric of our communities. They generate solidarity and promote social integration and tolerance. They are major drivers of the Canadian economy. The cultural sector alone contributes approximately $53.1 billion to Canada's GDP, and the sports sector, $6.6 billion. Some 600,000 jobs that are generated in that area. And we have the visitors that they attract, the visibility, the reputation for excellence, and quite simply, the pleasure they give us. To quote the Prime Minister, since the beginning of the crisis, artists have brought us comfort, laughter, and happiness. Athletes have continued to inspire us, encourage us, and make us proud. Those who work in the arts, culture, and sports sectors allow us to live their passion and make us dream. And in these days, when we are all at home, isolating, they help us feel a little less alone. These are just a few of the reasons why we must be there for them, like they are there for us. Today with you, I would like to summarize the impact of COVID-19 on arts, culture, heritage, and sport. I'd like to review the measures that our government has taken to support these sectors and give you an overview of our approach, which is intended to provide quick and flexible assistance to these sectors in the coming weeks. We are collectively facing the biggest crisis in our history, and organizations and workers in the arts, culture, and sports sectors were among the first to be affected. Several factors have increased the pressure on them: the ban on gatherings, the unexpected cancellation of cultural and sports activities, the closure of museums and facilities, the uncertainty that has gripped Canadian and international subscribers and sponsors, and the lack of opportunities to train and qualify for athletic competitions. All of this adds to the pressure for our artists and our sportsmen and women. Madam Chair, these sectors depend on their connection with the public. From the day containment measures were announced, these sectors have demonstrated exemplary solidarity and creativity, but without a stage, an auditorium, an audience, they cannot survive. If this situation persists, we can expect Canada's creative industry to face increasing and significant financial pressure. Over 1 month, losses are estimated at $4.4 billion at about 26,000 jobs. Over 3 months, they are estimated at $13.2 billion and about 81,000 jobs. Many organizations will be able to recover from these losses thanks to measures already announced by the government: the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the Business Credit Availability Program, and the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance for small businesses. We also ensured that these measures, which apply to Canadian society as a whole, would be useful to small and medium-sized businesses and not-for-profit organizations, many of which work in the areas of culture, heritage, and sport. We have also worked hard to free up funds quickly and to adapt to the realities of each line of business. We announced the accelerated processing of funding applications to the Canada Book Fund and the Canada Periodical Fund, and we confirmed that income from royalties would not be a barrier for artists and creators seeking eligibility for the emergency response benefits. The Canada Council for the Arts will provide some $60 million in advance funding to help cultural organizations that receive council grants to meet their immediate commitments. The federal government has, for 2021, put aside the Part 1 license fees for the CRTC, and that represents some $30 million. An independent panel of experts is set to make recommendations to the CRA with respect to print journalism and to help it out. In fact, the vast majority of the $30 million invested by our government in national COVID-19 awareness campaigns will be invested in Canadian media, in television, radio, newspapers, magazines, and digital media. All of these measures will provide our cultural heritage and sports organizations with a breath of fresh air. That said, though, we recognize that some of them may not be in a position to benefit from the measures already announced for all kinds of reasons. They may be cyclical revenues, they might be self-employed in contract work, and that creates barriers to accessing credit. This is why on April 17, 2020, the Prime Minister announced a $500 million amount of money in funding to establish the new COVID-19 Emergency Support Fund for cultural, heritage, and sport organizations. The fund is meant to complement the measures already announced and to strengthen our safety net, which is being sorely tested by the scope of the challenge.
Last Friday, I announced that this new emergency fund will be rolled out. How this emergency fund will be rolled out. The fund will be distributed in 2 phases in order to meet the financial needs of affected organizations, maintain jobs, and support business continuity. Canadian Heritage will divide the funding among select departmental programs and in collaboration with several partners. The breakdown of the funding has been presented. Here's a summary. Over $198 million will be provided to beneficiaries of arts and culture funding through existing programs. $72 million will be provided to the sports sector. $53 million will be provided to the heritage sector through the emergency component of the Museum Assistance Program. $3.5 million will be distributed under the Digital Citizen Initiative to help combat false and misleading COVID-19 information, as well as the racism and stigmatism that are often the result. $55 million will be distributed by the Canada Council for the Arts, and over $150 million will be distributed by the Canada Media Fund and Telefilm Canada to support the audiovisual sector. The use of the remaining funds will be based on needs. The rollout is already underway. Our program officers are in touch with organizations through the usual communications channel, and we will proceed in 2 phases. In phase 1, eligible recipient will not have to apply for funding. We will use the most recent application submitted to the program as a basis for topping up fund. Existing recipient of targeted Canadian Heritage programs will be asked to fill out an attestation. Once the attestation has been received and reviewed, the funding will flow shortly thereafter. Phase 2 of the program will focus on eligible organizations with heritage collections and other organizations that, for example, not currently receive funding from Canadian Heritage, the Canada Council for the Arts, Telefilm Canada, and the Canada Media Fund. The second phase will provide temporary support as follows. Funding for eligible organization with heritage collections through the emergency component of the Museum Assistance Program. Funding for other organizations, some of which do not currently receive funding from Canadian Heritage, the Canada Council for the Arts, Telefilm Canada, and the Canada Media Fund. Further details on phase 2 will be announced over the coming weeks. We want to find ways to broaden our support. Culture, heritage, and sport are at the very heart of our plan. The challenge is to ensure that as many organizations as possible survive the crisis so that Canada's cultural heritage and sport ecosystem remains intact. This is essential to the recovery we all want for our creators, artists, curators, athletes, and coaches, for our society, for our economy, and ultimately for each and every one of us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now we move to our rounds of questions. Our first round is 6-minute rounds, and our first MP is MP Rempel Garner. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister Guilbeault, for coming to committee. I was really pleased to hear you talk about the fact that you believe that heritage is a vital part of our social fabric and that artists can bring us comfort during this crisis. So I'm just wondering if you can tell the committee what constitutes Western heritage.
I thank the member for the question, Madam Speaker. As a Canadian, I would be one to believe in Canadian heritage from coast to coast to coast. But just last week, I was on the phone with Alberta Heritage Minister here to talk about how we can collaborate together to support the work that we do at the federal level, but also at the provincial level as well.
That's great. I'm just wondering if you think that Western heritage, because it's actually a thing, it would be like you asking me about Quebec culture and then me not being able to talk about that. So it is a thing. I'm just wondering if you think that Western heritage is important to Canada.
I believe that all parts of Canada's heritage is important to Canada. Western heritage, Eastern heritage, Northern heritage, First Nations.
Do you want to hazard a guess about what would be constituted in Western heritage?
Well, if you have suggestions in terms of what it is we can do to help support different parts of Canada's heritage ecosystem, we would be happy to consider them.
Do you think that Western heritage is under threat right now and perhaps needs a little bit of bolstering from, let's say, the Heritage Minister?
Oh, I think I have tried to outline how our entire heritage ecosystem is under threat right now, from coast to coast to coast. And artists are finding it very difficult right now in Ontario, in Alberta, in Saskatchewan.
Could you name one artist from Alberta? Like one artist?
Nancy Houston.
Okay, well, that's a start.
Great. I just finished one of her book.
Okay, great. Now, how would you, as Heritage Minister, preserve Western heritage if you don't know what it is?
I think my role is to support artists throughout this country. Many of our programs are available to organizations in every parts of the country. We're supporting artists in every parts of the country.
Have you met with
Western
any
Canada
groups
as
outside of the Stampede? Like, have you met with like anybody, like in terms of ratio between like Central Canadian people that lobby you? If I went onto your lobbyist registry right now, and let's say Alberta or Saskatchewan groups, what would you say that ratio looks like?
I can't give you an exact answer for the ratio. We could provide you with that information. As you know, that information is public. What I can tell you
I know what it is. I was just hoping you would.
Over the last few weeks, I have spoken with thousands of people from across the country, from every corner of the country, thousands.
So here's the thing, Minister. So, my constituents, they've arguably had, everybody in Canada's had a rough go, but they've had a particularly rough go because our economy was already in downturn because of your government's policies in the energy sector. So what would you tell somebody in Calgary who's watching this right now, who knows your background as a Greenpeace activist. You are the heritage minister, and you won't even talk about Western Canadian heritage. What would you say to them? Because I think they'd probably be pretty cheesed.
Well, what I can tell you is that the Alberta Heritage Minister has saluted my leadership to help artists and athletes throughout the COVID-19 crisis on a number of occasions publicly.
Hey, I know that minister. Fantastic. I'm talking about you and your government, because there's a lot of people in Western Canada who think that your government really doesn't care about us and our heritage doesn't matter to you. So I'm giving you a shot here to try and express some empathy and some understanding of what happens in my province. And you're really not giving me much to work with here. So I'm just wondering, given you're a Greenpeace activist, very vocal against the energy sector, and you haven't even acknowledged that there's
Madam
a Western
Chair.
Canadian heritage right now. So I'm just wondering
I believe I have.
Point of order.
I have a number of times, but just
one moment. We have a point of order from the floor. MP de Brussen?
We're kind of venturing beyond discussing minister and heritage, which is what we were talking about. We're venturing in. The questions now are veering into energy conversations and the like, but really he's here to talk about what the Minister of Heritage is doing and the Heritage Ministry.
I'd like to respond to that point of order, which doesn't count as part of my time.
Yes.
The energy sector actually contributes significantly to the heritage environment in Alberta. It's a huge source of philanthropy and funding for the arts. And a lot of that funding right now has been removed because of the downturn in the energy sector, which has been precipitated by decisions that have been made by the cabinet that the minister is sitting on. I think that this is very material, especially since the minister talked about artists bringing us comfort. And I am an MP from that part of the country. And I think that it's important that we be given the opportunity to talk about our heritage. I would like the minister, Madam Chair, in terms of relevancy, to talk about his plan to support Western heritage, because there's a lot of people in my province who don't feel comforted right now and would like some assurances from this government that they at least understand the plight of what's happening in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a yes, Mr. MP Massey.
I would agree. I come from an area of the country which our heritage has defined who we are. We're actually the oldest European settlement west of Montreal, and then went into a staging point where the auto industry defined us as much the story of people, but also the way we are artists. Even with the decline in this industry over the last number of decades, it still makes us who we are today down here. So I see the connection quite clearly, and I quite strongly believe that arts and culture is a significant part of our industry, as well as our heritage, and they're very much intertwined. So I think that everything is appropriate here.
So I'm going to rule to allow the conversation to continue. Madame Rempel, you still have some time remaining.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Minister, you haven't talked about Western heritage. Have you quantified, and can you give me a number, on the impact of the decline of the energy sector on philanthropy in the arts and cultural sector in Alberta? And how much money are you giving to Alberta? How much money are you giving to Alberta out of this fund?
I think I have answered your question on
Do you
a number
plan
of
on
times
giving any of this money
regarding
Western Canada?
Western heritage. And as I said, I've had just last week a conversation with the Alberta Heritage Minister. I've had several conversations
what are you
with
doing?
the Alberta Heritage Minister.
What are you doing? You have to put together a national strategy for unity.
Support the heritage sector in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, throughout Canada. I'm working closely with allies from across the country to do that.
Yeah,
thank you very much, Minister. The next round of questions goes to Nathaniel Erskine-Smith. MP Erskine-Smith, you have 6 minutes.
Thanks very much. My first question is for Minister Monsef. We have seen in the course of this recession deep impact on women's participation in the labor force, and very smart economists have called it a she-cession, but then also see the female labor force participation to be the most difficult to come back, and have pointed to childcare as central to those recovery efforts. And I noted the Prime Minister also recently highlighted the importance of childcare to recovery efforts. And I wonder if in your office, working in collaboration with Minister Hussein, we are going to see significant steps down this path and leadership from the federal government.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to MP Erskine Smith. You are absolutely right. This pandemic has hit women hardest. Women are the majority of those in long-term care. They're the majority of those who've tested positive. They're the majority of those on the front lines of this effort. 62% of the jobs lost due to COVID in March were women's jobs, often low paid and often racialized women. Women have also been called out of the workforce because daycares are closed, because schools are closed. And unlike other recessions, this economic recovery is going to require supporting women specifically. The 2008 recession, the studies are showing that women with children were the last to recover from that recession. In addition to supports through the Canada Child Benefit, in addition to the 40,000+ childcare spaces that we help support in our previous mandate, the Prime Minister has mandated myself and Minister Hussein to set up a childcare secretariat and to build the foundation for better access to childcare for all Canadians. And COVID further highlights the needs and the urgency around that commitment.
And I appreciate that. And so with respect to the Secretariat, can we expect you and your office as the Minister of Gender Equality to be pushing for that Secretariat to be created with haste and to place that Secretariat at the center of recovery efforts?
Madam Chair, I can assure all colleagues and Canadians that we are working not just with haste within the Government of Canada, but we are pulling in smart experts, economists, feminists from around the country to get it done and to get it done right.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate that. Minister Guilbeault, I have some questions, and maybe you could correct me because I might have my information. It might be mistaken because it really doesn't make sense to me. But I have in front of me an article related to the $50 million local journalism initiative. Now, civic journalism, unquestionably a public good and a good that I would like us to support, especially as we see civic journalism struggle to provide that. We see a struggle with local journalism, but the vast majority of this local journalism initiative is distributed by News Media Canada. And Christian Dognon, who's helping to coordinate these efforts for News Media Canada, was recently quoted saying, "LJI is a support program for the news industry, so we do not want to introduce new competition into already struggling markets." And I guess what I'm struggling to understand is why wouldn't we be encouraging innovation and new entrants to create more of this local journalism? Why would we be excluding new entrants and competition that we sorely need?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the article you're referring to. What I can tell you is that, I mean, we have been supporting local journalism through an investment of $50 million over 5 years, which means that this year 200 journalists will be hired in communities that are not as well deserved from a media perspective as others. The ad buy campaign we just did on COVID-19 for $30 million was distributed amongst more than 900 newspapers across the country, 500 radio stations and TV stations in 12 different languages. So I think we value the diversity of the media ecosystem in Canada. And
we should especially value the diversity of new entrants into the marketplace. And I encourage you to take a second look at the management of that fund, because when I see, as one example, the Sprawl, a digital startup in Calgary, unable to access funding from that $50 million, but able to access a startup grant from Facebook. I mean, I've been the first person to be hard on Facebook, and Facebook has helped to gut the news industry in many ways, and they're trying to rectify that with some small funding. It's incredible to me that a local startup in Canada would receive funding from Facebook and not from that $50 million fund. So you really do need to take a second look. And the other piece that I'd like you to take a look at is Google, Facebook make up 90% of the online digital ad revenue. And at the same time, Google and Facebook have profited significantly from news content that they have done nothing to create. And is your office taking a serious look at France, Spain, Australia to ensure a fairer profit sharing model as between Google, Facebook, and these tech giants and our news media ecosystem?
Yes, we are looking very carefully at what France and Australia have done. As you may be aware, they've acted through their competition bureau. So we are looking at the mechanisms we have in Canada. Obviously, legislation and regulation from between different countries differs. So these type of bodies don't necessarily have the same type of powers. But we are looking at this very closely, and we've said for many months that we want the web giants to do their fair share, and clearly right now they're not. And if we can use existing tools to make that happen, we will. And if we need to create new tools, we will.
Thanks very much. They should absolutely pay into our news media ecosystem.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the round. La prochaine députée.
The next member is Mr. Lemieux. You have 6 minutes. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I thank Minister Guilbeault and Minister Monsef for being with us. It's very important for us today to have them here. I want to speak about Quebecers and Canadians' ability to access high-speed internet. Ms. Monsef, are you ready to recognize that this is an essential service that should exist for everyone, that there should be no geographical obstacles preventing it? It is essential. It's not just an expenditure, but it's something that is essential for our villages and to bring people together.
Yes, and it has been.
Well, if it's essential, then you have to measure this by 2 factors. Does 2030 seem an acceptable date for you, and will the monies be invested to reach that goal?
We put forward in 2019 the first plan in Canada's history to connect every community to high-speed internet. We've set aside $6 billion to date to get it done, and I can assure my colleague that our goal is to expedite the timeline in as much as we can, particularly post-COVID.
You mentioned that we have to learn from the errors of the past. And I think of a multi-partisan committee to advise on this matter. I think that there should be concerted effort and work done together to bring us to good results. I would like to have budgetary approval for programs like that. And what if there was a contribution by the private sector as well as the public sector, $5 to $6 billion from the Government of Canada? But will we have adequate funding over the coming years? Because it tells me that in 2022 there will still be some 1.4 million homes without high speed.
Madam Chair, the plan we've developed hasn't been developed on the back of a napkin. It's been developed with partners across the country. It's been shaped by feedback of colleagues like Goody Hutchins from the really small communities, colleagues from Quebec, colleagues from every corner of the country, and from Canadians themselves. Our dollars are meant to incent private sector investments. It's in our economic benefits to get this done and to get it done fast. It's also part of the equity equation that all of us are working hard to address. So I can assure my colleague that we are on it. Now more than ever, the urgency to get this done quickly is apparent.
Yes, but if you want 100% of Canadians to have access to high speed, do you have an estimate of how much that will cost?
The investments that we've put forward so far are meant to connect about 400,000 households. The $6 billion invested is going to get us closer to it. We estimate that about $8 billion is required, and our private partners, as well as provinces, as well as territories, as well as Indigenous partners, are helping to further strengthen the federal investments made. I want to let my colleague know, though, that this requires all players, all hands on deck, but it requires a strong role by the federal government, and we have been and will continue to play that strong role.
À quelle date?
Well, at what time? What will the date be that you think it will be acceptable, that the situation will reflect the $8 billion and people will have access to high speed? I understand what you're saying about partners, but the federal government has a leadership role to play. When will the money be there?
I think my colleague and I agree. The federal government plays a leadership role. We are playing that role. That money has been invested since budget 2016. We have been adding to it. And Madam Chair, there are tens of thousands of households that have access to internet today that didn't before we formed government. By the end of this year, there will be an additional 50,000 households connected to internet. By the end of next year, there will be an additional 250,000 households connected to internet. By the end of 2022, there will be 400,000 households connected in nearly 1,000 communities, including 190 Indigenous communities. This is something that should have been done decades ago, but we are on it, and we are on it with great urgency.
Plusieurs ministres de votre gouvernement.
Some ministers in your government have said that since the beginning of this crisis, that they have come to understand the real pressing need that many Quebecers and Canadians have to actually have access to the internet. What has been done hasn't been really adapted to the needs of Canadians in the past. How are you going to get around this and see that they get what they need?
Unfortunately, ça c'est le seul. On n'a plus.
Unfortunately, we are out of time for this round.
Massé, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, ministers, for being here today. Minister Monsef, do you know how much money Canada has taken in on spectrum auctions?
No, I don't specifically. I think my deputy is on the line, and he'd be happy to share that.
It's a relatively public number. It's over $20 million. Do you know how much money you raised in the this last spectrum auction that you had?
Nope, but I'm sure you do, MP Massé.
Yeah, I do. It's again because it's actually important to know this file. It was $3.47 billion. Your government has committed how much of that $3.47 billion to use right now in the 2019 budget?
2019 set aside over $1 billion, both for the Universal Broadband Fund and for the investments we're making in low Earth orbit satellites.
Yeah, it was $1.7 billion. And so we're missing $1.77 billion from that spectrum alone. What did you do with the $1.77 billion? And I'll point out that the one that you did put in, the lower amount, is over 10 years. So there still is that money available because only a portion of it, $170 million, is being spent this year. So where is the rest of that money from that spectrum alone?
Madam Chair, if my colleague wishes to discuss spectrum, I highly encourage him to either connect with our officials or speak with Minister Baines, who has the lead on the spectrum file.
You just spent the majority of your testimony talking about spectrum.
I think I spent a paragraph talking about spectrum, but okay.
Where else do you expect to connect Canadians from if you're not going to use the proceeds from the spectrum or the spectrum itself? And I've just asked a simple question as a cabinet minister: what happened to the rest of that money and the money that's unspent from that spectrum? Because we can roll out further spectrum connection right now. The money is there. The Canadian government has collected over $20 billion in spectrum alone. And just in the last budget of your year there, the last spectrum alone, you have another one coming up. You have plenty of money to connect Canadians now. You're saying it's important for access and equality, but just not now. that, the geography isn't the problem. The Liberals are the problem with regards to connecting Canadians, because the money's right there in the government's bank account. So I want to know, where is that money? Why did you decide as cabinet to redirect that away from Canadians and connecting to them? If it's so important, why not use that money to connect them now? Why have to go on bended knee to the private sector to try to do something when the capital has already been raised at no cost from the spectrum?
Madam Chair, we have invested more in connecting Canadians to high-speed internet than any other government. If my colleague is suggesting that we are holding back in any way, I want to assure him that he is wrong. I also want to remind him
that's your own budget documents. Your own budget documents say that you're spending $170 million right now because you're going to spread the first set of investment over 10 years, and there still is that $1.77 billion. I want to know why it can't be used now to connect Canadians.
We are working to connect Canadians, and I want to remind my colleague that he voted against the funding we set aside to connect Canadians to high-speed internet.
If you want to play that game, I can do that quite easily. I can talk about how the Liberals voted against previous spectrum auctions and money used to actually connect Canadians as well, too. I mean, I've been around here for a while, so I can list out, as long as the cows want to come home, at times that Liberals have voted against stuff, including my border here, including the environment, including actually Jack Layton's climate change bill when it was through the Senate with the senators there. I can go through a whole list from the environment to spectrum of what you guys did and voted against if you want to play that juvenile game. I'm simply asking, as a cabinet minister, why there's a loss of that money.
Mr. Massey, I'm just going to ask if you could lower the tone a little bit. It's getting a little aggressive, please. Thank you.
Fair enough, Madam Chair. And I apologize if it was aggressive. I don't mean to be that way. But the reality is, when I'm hearing about those type of things, you voted against that, you voted against this. What I'm asking for right now is the resources that this government has collected, and they put in their budget and talked about that, and the ministers talked about spectrum, and where is the dollars that were used to gather in the spectrum itself through the budget, and where are they now? Where is that $1.77 billion? And why won't the government use those funds to connect Canadians now? It's a simple thing. Is there a reason why to make Canadians wait? Maybe there is a reason.
So, Madam Chair, where the funds go, they go to the Consolidated Revenue Fund, firstly, and he knows this because, as he said, he's been around. Second, we are investing heavily to connect as many Canadians as possible. That plan is working. There is no plan to hold back. If anything, because of COVID, we are accelerating those investments, and it's great to see this level of passion. Madam Speaker, we're going to need it and cross-party support to further accelerate investments.
And my simple point in this is that you have the monies capable of it now. You don't have to wait around for the private sector, and you've created the spectrum where there's a significant cost and there's significant black holes. Why can't that money be used by the government now to accelerate the timeline to connect Canadians? Why is it okay to be equal later, but not equal now, especially when kids and other people are connecting to their education, businesses, their future, and we have a disproportionate cost, even in communities like mine that are connected. I have some of the most challenged area with some of the highest costs in this country, and we have some of the biggest disadvantaged groups, from new immigrants to as well as existing Canadians that have impoverished areas. You're making them wait for lower prices, and you're making them wait for service.
No, we're not.
That's the time for that round. Our next round of questions for our second round. For 5 minutes, we have MP Patzer. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'm going to continue on the same path that MP Massey is going with Minister Monsef here. The news actually keeps getting worse, as I'm actually looking at the Connectivity Strategy for Canada document put out by the Liberal government for budget 2019. The $1.7 billion is actually for 13 years, which is going to take us to 2032. Why do we have to wait till 2032 to connect rural communities to broadband?
Well, we don't, and as my colleague knows, Madam Chair, with 2 projects in his own riding well underway because of our investments, we are seizing every moment to connect as many Canadians as possible. Infrastructure projects, which are broadband projects, do take time, and we're building the kind of infrastructure that can be future-proof so that it can support additional technological investments. And Madam Chair, our government sees this as an economic imperative as well as one to address inequality across the country.
Yeah, I actually spent a bunch of time. I spent 10 years actually working in telecommunications in this province here. So I'm keenly aware of investments that have been made in the province, both in the last couple of years, but also long before that as well. Yeah, so one of the other things I was reading about in the document is it speaks about an online portal for municipalities to see all the funding available and how to apply for it. So what is the name of the website? Is it up and running, and is it getting used?
Madam Chair, canada.ca/getconnected allows communities across the country to test their internet speeds. It allows for a comprehensive map, which is a significant tool for communities to apply for these projects. And we are working to further fine-tune our efforts as well as our tools to make sure that more Canadians, particularly those in smaller communities without as much capacity to get grant writing and projects underway, are able to access and provide that service to their communities.
Okay, but a website for speed tests doesn't direct municipalities on where they can apply for funding. So would you mind trying again?
Well, the funds aren't open yet for the Universal Broadband Fund, but canada.ca/getconnected is where folks can go now and where information about programs will be once the Universal Broadband Fund opens.
Okay, so they'll be able to go to that exact website to find where they can apply for funding. So that's good to know. Yeah, further on there, when you're talking about the mapping, one of the issues right now that we have with mapping is lots of companies actually use a low quality signal mapping, and they use that as a means to mislead consumers by realizing that, oh, we have your whole area covered, when the reality is they don't, because obviously low quality signal, you can't do anything with that. Are these maps, can you confirm that they are high quality signal mapping?
Yes, my colleague is referring to the hexagon model, which we heard from stakeholders was leaving too many underserved communities out of the scope. So we've now changed the map so that the radius they cover is within 250 meters. These are more accurate and will lead to more Canadians getting connected.
And that's going to be high quality though. It's not going to just be that they can get signal. It's going to be that because the reason why I'm concerned is we're looking at 50 and 10 as a threshold. And right now companies can say, oh, that's provided there. But when you do a test, you don't even get remotely close to that. So that's where the issue lies. Will it be high quality signal on that map? Or will it continue to mislead consumers?
It's a high quality map. It's been improved, and if folks are looking for applications and announcements, go to canada.ca/getconnected. You'll be able to do that speed test. You'll be able to see that map. You'll be able to get connected to other programs, for example, through the CRTC fund, which are accepting applications right now.
Do you think that satellite internet is going to be, because you're talking about low orbit satellites, are you thinking that that is going to be one of the main drivers to providing rural Canadians with reliable internet?
I think low Earth orbit satellites are going to be needed to connect harder to reach communities, particularly in rural, in remote and more northern communities. There is a set of tools though, and high quality fiber is a big part of our plan.
Yeah, because wired is always better. So, I mean, the more we can invest in fiber, the better. Is that part of your plan?
Yes, and it's good to see us on the same page.
And that is all we have for that round. The next 5-minute round goes to MP Longfield. You have the floor. MP Longfield, you're still on mute.
Yeah, that's the quote of this this whole session. I'd like to thank both ministers for being here with us. I'd like to start off with Minister Monsef and then finish up with Minister Guilbeault. We've been talking a lot about spectrum. The last session of Parliament, the Industry Committee spent a lot of time studying this, and I felt like for a moment there I was back in those discussions. But to bring them into the COVID-19 era, the way that we are allocating spectrum and in fact doing spectrum auctions has changed. we did study areas like Peterborough and Guelph and even Windsor and some communities that had a lot of rural around us getting brought into spectrum auctions, so that the more profitable parts of the coverage area were gobbled up, and then other parts were left fallow and weren't developed. Could you maybe discuss how the new way of doing spectrum will benefit the communities that are now experiencing difficulties through COVID-19?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, MP Longfield. It was probably a lifetime ago, but it was only March 3rd when Minister Baines announced that he would be setting aside 50 megahertz in the next spectrum option to provide a more equal footing to those smaller ISPs, to provide greater support, greater speeds, greater capacity for new applications for smaller communities that don't right now have that access. And he based that decision on what we'd heard from industry, what we'd heard across the country, and many thanks to the committee for their work. We've seen that what this does in the past is increase the way that smaller communities can be connected and enhance it by about 50%.
Great, thank you, and the work continues. Minister Guilbeault, I'm very interested in the heritage funding that has been announced. Guelph has a lot of festivals. We've got the Hillside Festival, the Jazz Festival, Multicultural Festival. We've got festivals that won't be happening this year, and because of that, we've got some serious impact on our hotel and hospitality sector. I'm wondering how the funding that you've described will help get us through this year and be able to still be in place for next year's festival season.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I think it's an important question, and it's an important point. I mean, what we're trying to do with this funding, this is not funding for the recovery, for when we are no longer confined. This is really emergency funds to help as many of our arts and cultural organizations make it through that first wave of the crisis. We clearly understand that we will need to do more, and the Prime Minister said it, and I've said it many times, we will do more to support our heritage, cultural, and arts organization as we rebuild, as we recover from COVID-19. But that is not what those funds are destined for. They're really there to help their emergency funds and to help them make it through that first wave of the crisis.
So will there be a pickup point that we can direct the not-for-profits and the performers themselves to be able to access these funds?
Well, as far as organizations are concerned, I would encourage you to send them to Canada's Heritage website, the Canadian Heritage website. Canadian Heritage doesn't fund directly artists. The Canada Council for the Arts does, and as I've said earlier in my remarks, they have received additional funding to support arts organization, but artists as well.
And you do have a complicated file across Canada. The artists also include authors and publishers.
Yeah.
And at the end of this, publishers will be returning a lot of books, which will leave a void in inventory that we'd love to fill with Canadian authors. Is there any thought towards that?
Well, as someone who's published 3 books myself, I know a bit about the issue of copyrights, editors. I've worked with many of them. This is an issue that's very dear to my heart, and this is clearly it is in my mandate later. The Prime Minister has asked me to look into this. I'm assisted in that task by the Member of Parliament from Toronto Danforth, whom you may remember was chair of the Heritage Committee, who worked on the copyright issue. So the file is in good hands, and we will be moving on it as fast as we can.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Gray. You have 5 minutes. MP Gray, you're still on mute.
wasn't automatic there. Minister Monsef, I have a question for you. With more people working from home and using the internet to socialize with their friends and family during COVID-19, rural areas are specifically hard hit by data caps and throttling. The bandwidth capacity for a consistent 50 up, 10 down broadband connection is critical. How many of those rural households have gained access to consistent broadband internet under these parameters since your government took office in 2015?
We've set aside investments, and thank you, MP Gray. We've set aside investments to connect close to 400,000 households. 25,000, just under the Connect to Innovate program, have been connected. This year, 50,000 will be connected.
Okay, thank you very much. And also as part of that, through the same program, your government pledged to connect 300 rural and remote communities in Canada to high-speed internet by 2021. How many communities have been connected? Do you have any information for us? Is it just select communities, or are there a number of communities across the country that have been connected?
Sure, I will pull that up for you right now. By the end of next year, over 50,000 households across 150 communities that don't currently have high-speed internet will have access.
And those would be primarily rural communities?
Yes, it'll be mostly communities that are considered rural or remote, but that also includes communities that are really close to urban centers but don't have access. So that includes backbone as well as last mile investments.
Okay, Minister Monsef, according to the CRTC, 87.2% of major Canadian transport roads and highways currently have access to mobile LTE, which is full signal. Does this actually include full signal, or is this low signal, such as 1 bar, which is classified as accessible LTE? How many bars would that be that fall within that percentage?
Madam Chair, there are communities like my own that weren't connected to the kind of cell service that would provide accessibility and particularly safety. With projects like the EORN project, for example, we are working to address those cell gaps because they are a matter of safety as well as a matter of economic growth.
So it sounds like we don't really know, when we're talking about percentage of coverage for signal, that we're not really specifically clear about what that percentage is. So as part of that, though, how would you define rural when you're saying that we're connecting with all these different rural communities? What would be defined as a rural community?
Well, that is an excellent question. Rural includes resource-dependent communities. It includes agricultural communities. It includes those who are close to urban centers, but have a mix of both rurality and urban. It includes many in Indigenous communities. The majority of Atlantic Canada, well, 40% of Atlantic Canada is considered rural. But if you want to get into a philosophical discussion about what is rural, I just hosted a roundtable with experts across the country last week, and there's no clear consensus. For the purposes of connectivity, we are using the definition for those who don't have access to 5010.
Okay, thank you, Minister. I have a couple of questions for Minister Guilbeault. You stated just a few minutes ago that you were supporting news media and that you would put funding to hire 200 journalists in communities across the country. What percentage of this would go to local and community media?
This is entirely for local media. That fund is dedicated to local media.
And how would a local media apply for that? Is there a website set up so that they could easily apply for that? Is that all ready to go?
We would be happy to provide you with the information as to how a media outlet could apply for that funding.
Okay, thank you. In addition to that, you had announcements where you launched a $30 million public advertising campaign on physical distancing and COVID-19 with the purpose of advertising going to various media. Can you confirm what percentage of the spending also went to local and community media?
I could get you the breakdown. What I can tell you is that 97% of it went to Canadian media. As I said earlier, 900 print, 500 TV and radio stations across the country, different languages, Farsi, Italian, Spanish, Mandarin, French and English, obviously.
Do you know, Minister?
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for that round. The next round of questions goes to MP Johari. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to welcome both ministers and the department officials. I'll be sharing my time, Madam Chair, with MP Hutchins. Given the fact that I only have 2 minutes now, I'll focus my question to Mr. Guilbeault. Mr. Guilbeault, the $500 million investment in arts and culture was very welcomed in my community. I have a very highly ethnic community, and the print media within the ethnic community plays a huge role in keeping the community informed, especially around times like this, and specifically focus on certain demographics. Seniors heavily rely on the ethnic media, to especially the print media, to be able to get not only information about activities in the community, but also how do they deal and how do they manage the COVID-19 challenges we are facing. Just to give you a sense, I have 3+ Chinese, about 5+ Persian, 3+ Russians, 2 English print media alone, and 2 TV stations and 1 radio. We're very excited, but when we actually did a deep dive trying to figure out where they can apply, as you highlighted, there are funds to be able to hire journalists, but we're looking for funds to be able to keep them sustained, because what is happening is the majority of the revenue was coming from small businesses that now they don't have revenue, so they're not buying any advertising. And I understand wage subsidy is there, and I understand they can go get $40,000, but what are we doing under arts and culture and as part of that $500 million for the ethnic print media? Thank you.
I thank the member from Richmond Hill, Madam Chair, for his question. It is a really important issue, which is why, as I was just saying, the ad campaign we did for $30 million on the COVID-19 was done in 12 different languages. But as part of the $500 million, there is $70 million that was set aside for local news, local media organizations across the country to help support them through this crisis, including third languages media across the country. So beyond the wage subsidy, beyond the $30 million, there's an extra $70 million that will go to help support these news organizations, on top of the other $50 million that I was talking about earlier on, that we adopted in the 2019 budget specifically for local media.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate some sort of guidance from your department for us to be able to reach these funds. And I yield the rest of the time to MP Hutchins.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Minister. It's always a pleasure to see you here. And Minister Monsef, for you, I think it's great you'll agree with me that all our colleagues around the table agree the importance of connectivity for rural especially. It's interesting because the previous government's Connecting Canada program connected 220 households between 2009 and 2012 at speeds of 5 to 1. And they were estimating to do 280,000 households between 2015 and 2017, but our government upped that to 350,000 households. Minister, in your comments, you mentioned that our announced funding of $6 billion is going towards internet investments. And that contrasts the conservative approach, which essentially leaves rural and remote communities to pay for the sizable infrastructure projects on their own. So can you tell us in a few minutes about how you and our government are working with colleagues around the table to make sure every single Canadian has access to affordable high-speed internet, and it doesn't matter where they live?
Madam Chair, I'd like to thank MP Hutchins for her question and for her leadership. She brings the lens of really small, really rural communities to the table, and it is a perspective that is appreciated and very helpful. Colleagues on this call may disagree about the philosophical approach to invest. Colleagues like MP Massey believe that government should take on 100% of the costs. Some colleagues believe that the private sector should shoulder the costs. We as Liberals believe
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, MP Massey?
I did not say that government should pay 100% of the costs. I said that the government should use the money that they've actually got from the spectrum auction. There's a difference between the two, is that we have a surplus of money in the current spectrum auction and several that have taken place under Liberal tenure that has not been used.
MP Massey, that is debate, so I'm going to allow the continuation, the last 11 seconds. Thank you.
We believe government plays a big role in connecting Canadians. We believe in the role that the private sector plays, as well as other orders of government, and funds that go to the consolidated revenue funds go to health transfers. They go to social transfers. They fund other priorities.
Thank you very much, Minister. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. La prochaine tour de questions.
The next round of questions goes to Mr. Champoux, 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses today. I would like to speak to Minister Guilbeault about the assistance that is being offered to the media. The media have been very profoundly shaken by the crisis. I know that media are living through difficult times. The government is trying to help, but concretely, Minister, you have invested some $30 million throughout Canada. Yes, but that's about the same amount that the Quebec government has invested in ads to support media. We in Drummondville, so you understand, there is a great need for money. Some of 15, what they will receive, though, will be about $1,500, which will hardly allow them to survive the crisis. Minister, would you be willing to consider some sort of new program to boost advertising and to provide direct investment in the regions through the various agencies? Would you consider this type of forum? Quick help that they need. I thank the member for Drummondville for his question. I think I have a technical problem here. I can't see you anymore. I wasn't able to see you for a few minutes. You will recall that your party has asked questions about investments in advertising. That is to say that it wasn't sufficiently done in the Canadian media and that there was... You're talking about the past. I want to talk about the present. Yes, but what we did was we did an ad campaign that invested some 4.7% to boost the Canadian media. We have the $17 million that have been set aside for local media and the $500 million fund that was done, and there is also access to other funding as well. Minister, would you be willing to consider the possibility of direct investment in regional medias? I'm always willing to discuss with you, the member for Drummond. Thank you. The next round is for Mr. Massey.
Minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the reason I feel so passionate about some of the questions I've asked is because I come from an area where people are often told they're equal, but just not now. And I have a problem with that. I would like to ask Minister Monsef a follow-up question with regards to quality, and that what does she say to those people that, statistically, it's mostly women and service sectors that are very vulnerable, seasonal work, as well as part-time work, that do not qualify for employment insurance, because they don't make enough hours because of the government policy that sets the employment insurance model. And then they don't make enough money from the previous year to qualify for CERB benefits. What would you like to say to those people right now?
Madam Chair, as a woman in politics committed to addressing those inequalities, I share my colleagues' concerns, and I most certainly share his need to address the inequality gaps. To his question around ensuring supports for the most vulnerable, that's been the priority of our government in the response.
So why are those people not eligible if you don't make $5,000? So right now we have many people that I represent having one of the highest rates of immigration and new Canadians and having one of the highest rates of poverty. And also we have issues related to a series of other economic issues that didn't make enough money for the $5,000 last year and they didn't make enough money for employment insurance. Why can't she and the government change the current model they have now to either entitle them to employment insurance or to CERB benefits? What is stopping them from doing that?
Madam Chair, as I was saying, even before COVID, we were committed to addressing those vulnerabilities. We lifted 1 million Canadians out of poverty. We provided affordable housing to 1 million households. We cut child poverty rate by 40%.
Why should somebody pay into employment insurance and not receive a benefit because of an arbitrary number of hours? So those things aren't actually helping the individual person. Why should somebody have to go to a part-time or a job that does not meet their employment insurance and have to pay that and then later on not be eligible for CERB benefits? I don't want to hear about other programs. Why is it 5,000? Why not 4,000, 3,000, 2,000, or no amount of work? They're denied both.
Madam Chair, MP Massey has been around for a long time, as he says, but he's never seen a crisis like this. We are doing everything we can to support as many Canadians as possible in these unprecedented times.
Thank you very much. And now we are moving into the third round of questions, and the first 5-minute round goes to MP Dreeshen. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And my questions will actually be going to Minister Guilbeault. Mr. Minister, in addition to the big city events across the country, COVID-19 has forced the cancellation of literally hundreds of rodeos, community fairs, music festivals, and farm fairs and exhibitions, all of which are great economic importance to the local area, to our local agricultural societies, our seasonal entertainers, our local merchants, as well as individual craft and food vendors. Now, as Heritage Minister, just a few moments ago, you were struggling as to what Western Heritage was and how it affects these small town communities. And I say this because as Western Canadians, we understand and we cherish our pioneer spirit, those strong and gentle hands that built this country, Canada's true environmentalists, its farmers and its ranchers, its surveyors and the fur traders that opened up the West, the merchants and the laborers that kept commerce going, and the brave military men and women that have fought and continue to fight to keep this land strong and free. That's our Western heritage. That's what we're talking about. When earlier you had talked about how you're going to be able to connect and help with the arts, I had a chance when it said that you had written 3 books. Although my French isn't very good to catch out what the titles were, I certainly got the gist of what Ms. Rempel-Gardner was talking about earlier. And I've been a patron for the Calgary Opera for 20 years, local county theaters, CFL for 20 years. But believe me, it's our oil and gas sector that funds the arts in this country. And they have been attacked by this government. And I am extremely frustrated because of those types of things. Now, over my shoulder, and I know you're not supposed to use props, but it's a photograph of my grandparents' neighbor, Jim Ross, and the Calgary Stampede winning championship rig and his teammates. He was the man that singing legend Wilf Carter used to sing about. And Central Alberta is home to countless rodeo men and women that use their knowledge and their skill of normal ranch hand routines, and they display this expertise to the world. So to the minister, are you aware of the significance of our Western way of life? And will you stand firmly against self-promoting celebrities in preserving our heritage to help bridge the rural-urban divide as we all work through these challenging times?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the member from Red Deer for his question and his passion for the arts and culture, which we share in common. Heritage is an issue for all Canadians in all of its diversity and its distinction across the country, and our goal is to help arts and cultural organizations across the country to make it through this crisis, wherever they are, regardless of where they are.
Thank you. And you've indicated there's going to be funding announcements, very few details. They're sort of the order of the day for what we can expect. But is there a firm deadline to ensure that these funds can get out as soon as possible, preferably in the next couple of weeks?
That's our goal, absolutely.
The Public Health Agency of Canada has posted guidelines aimed at helping event planners figure out whether to cancel mass gatherings of people. And my question is, when will this government move forward to assist these small fairs and their associated events, which represent such a critical part of Canada's heritage, so they've got a chance to keep their doors open as we move past this community lockdown?
As I said, we have unveiled last week the details of how the money would be spent to help many different types of arts, heritage, and cultural organizations across the country. But I can give you a clear example of where we're helping Alberta organizations more so than we would normally do for the rest of the country. On the sports side of things, we decided to allocate the money to provinces, not in relationship to the number of people in the province, but in relationship to the number of provincial sports organizations. And to its credits, Alberta has way more provincial sports organizations than many other Canadian provinces or territories. So Alberta will be getting a bigger share of the sports money of that aid that it would normally do under normal federal provincial agreement.
Thank you.
Solely based on population. So you want a clear example of something the federal government is doing to help Albertans? There you go.
Okay, appreciate that. Now, of course, going back to what I was saying before, and we, as I said, the attacks we have on our oil and gas, we have the same type of thing, animal rights activists that are going after our agriculture. This rural-urban divide is something that's extremely critical.
MP Dreeshen,
yes.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that's the end of your time. Our next 5-minute round goes to MP Lambropoulos. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, I'd like to first thank both ministers for being here with us today. Thank you so much for being here to answer our questions. My first question is going to Minister Guilbeault. Alors, il y a plusieurs industries.
There are some industries in Montreal that are related to tourism.
Festival, just for last festival. Fierté Montréal. Is my French okay? Sorry, I'm going to continue. So we have many festivals that. Does everyone hear me?
Yeah,
no? Okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah, and so it's not only going to affect the festivals themselves, but it's going to affect the restaurant businesses, the nightlife businesses, like it was mentioned earlier, hotels. And so Montreal is going to be severely impacted by what's going on, especially with the projections that came out on Friday with regards to Quebec and COVID-19. So we can see that if we reopen our society, it's going to be extremely dangerous for many, many people. And I believe that we're probably going to remain closed for a much longer period than expected. So what do you think, first of all, are the impacts on these different industries that I've just mentioned? Do you have any idea what the losses will be for Montreal specifically? And also, what are we going to be doing in the future? Do you see us putting forward more money in order to help support these industries going forward over the summer months?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question, and thank the member from Saint Laurent. I mean, as an environmentalist, I tend to look at things as ecosystem, and frankly, I would do the same in regards to the arts, hospitality sector, restaurants. They do go hand in hand. They were amongst the first sectors that were hit, and tourism, obviously, and they were probably going to be the last ones to come back to a normal or a new normal, which is why our government we've been working we've been looking at this from an ecosystemic approach, and what can I do in the heritage side of things in collaboration with what my colleague Mélanie Joly can do on the tourism side of things, and what my colleague Minister Ng on the small and medium-sized businesses side of things, so that once we can make it through this crisis, our ecosystems are still intact and we are able to pick it up and start running again. In answer to your second question, we do not know the scale of the economic impacts in the coming months. I mean, we are starting to have some ideas, but we will need to have more information. But I just want to quickly quote the Montreal Board of Trade, which saluted our $500 million aid package that was announced last week for arts, culture, and sports organization as something that would be significant for the Montreal and the Greater Montreal community.
As well, obviously our Olympians were getting ready for 2020, summer 2020, and it's not going to be happening this year. What are the effects on them, and how are we trying to help? Can you be more specific as to how we're helping Team Canada as summer and this year?
Yes, thank you for the question. So as I said, of the $500 million, 72 million will go to the sports sector. Of that 72 million, roughly half of it will go to national federations, Sports Canada, different types of sports federation, and the other half will go to provincial organization, and through our partnership, provincial and territorial organization, and through our partnership with them, they will be, the money will be flowing through provinces and territories. But there's also a $5 million that we set aside to help our athletes prepare for the next Olympics, and the postponement of the Olympics created all sorts of logistical and financial problems for our athletes. So we wanted to set aside some money to make sure that we could be there for them.
Thank you very much. Mary Monsef, obviously women and the status of women is something that's very important to me. And so I'm actually going to take advantage of the fact that you're here with us today to ask you a couple of questions on the women who are being mostly affected at home may be dangerous to their well-being and to that of their children. So women can remain as safe as possible, even if they're in dangerous situations.
Actually, I'm just going to pause. MP Lambropoulos, you're cutting out. So is it possible for you to repeat your question?
Yeah, sorry. So Mary Monsef, if you, I don't know what you heard, but I'll just repeat the whole thing. A lot of women are in a really dangerous spot right now, being at home, unfortunately, and so their children are also in danger. What is our government doing to make sure that during this period of time where people are working from home, Canadians, especially women in Canada and children in Canada, can maintain, their safety?
Madam Chair, I understood the question. It is a pretty important question, so I'll leave it to you to determine how much time I have to answer it.
Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for MP Lambropoulos, and I wouldn't want to give you 10 seconds to answer such an important question. But with that, we actually are at 7:30, and I want to verify with the ministers. I understand that according to the schedule that they had to leave at 7:30. So I wanted to know if that is still the case or if they're able to stay.
Madam Chair, if there's a woman suffering abuse in a home right now and you're talking to her via Zoom, this is the hand signal that's been created by the Canadian Women's Foundation. If you see the signal, you can check in on her, you can connect to a shelter in your community or a women's organization and get her the help. We're supporting over 400 shelters and over 150 sexual assault centers across the country, in addition to those in Quebec. So if you're suffering in silence and you think that there's nowhere to go right now, there are thousands of Canadians across the country whose doors are open to you, and they will keep you and your loved ones safe. You don't have to stay in an abusive relationship.
Thank you, Minister. So are the two ministers, are you able to stay for some more additional questions, or because according to the schedule you had to leave at 7:30, I want to just verify.
I can stay a bit longer.
I have to go, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Minister Monsef, and thank you very much for the important message regarding the health and safety of women across Canada. I appreciate it enormously. With that, we will move to the next round of questions. We have MP Rempel. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions will be directed to Minister Guilbeault. So I know that there's some discussion about, I think your government has spent $3.5 million on a digital citizen initiative to support democracy and social cohesion related to the spread of misinformation on COVID. So this particular I'm just trying to get a sense of what would be covered under that or not. So this particular statement, border measures are highly ineffective and in some cases can create harm. We see that in countries that had the worst expression, the tightest borders. Would that be misinformation?
So thank you for the question. Sorry, technical difficulty there for a second. I mean, what we're trying to do with this money, and obviously it's not the federal government doing the work. We've partnered with 3 organizations across Canada, La Société de la Calédonie du Nouveau-Brunswick. I'm trying to answer your question.
I'm trying to get a sense of
La Fédération professionnelle des journalistes du Québec and the Institute for Canadian Citizenship to help Canadians have access to the best possible information on COVID-19, which I think you...
Point of order, Madam Chair. Point of order, Madam Chair.
We have a point of order.
This is my time. I would remind through you, Madam Chair, that this is my time, and I appreciate the minister might want to talk about who he's working with, but I'm trying to get a sense, given that the government is investing in an initiative that might restrict free speech, what constitutes misinformation? So I asked him if the statement, border measures are highly ineffective and in some cases can create harm, if that was out in the public, if that would constitute misinformation.
So
with regard to COVID.
On the point of order, I will allow the continued questions. I ask that, again, members and witnesses direct their comments through the chair, and that we will use what we are doing with the special committee on COVID-19, that the answer be roughly around the same time as the question. Thank you.
So as I was trying to say, Madam Chair, it's not up to the government to decide. We're working with these organizations so they can help Canadians better understand and have access to the most important information regarding the pandemic of COVID-19.
Great. So how about the statement, preliminary investigations conducted by the Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the novel coronavirus. Would that be misinformation?
Again, Madam Chair, if it's the same question, it's going to be the same answer. So we are working with these organizations so they can provide, like the Quebec Federation of Professional Journalism, so that they can provide Canadians with the best possible information and help them detect, because unfortunately there are people who are trying to scam
so can
Canadians.
I try, Madam Chair, can I try so scamming Canadians? I don't want that.
Well,
I'm just trying to get a sense of what they would. Thank you.
Again, may I ask that we try to avoid the back and forth and we go through the chair, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm trying to get a sense of what these third-party organizations would deem to be misinformation. So evidence shows that restricting the movement of people and goods during public health emergencies is ineffective in most situations. Would that be deemed as misinformation?
Same question, same answer. It's not the government who's going to decide. We're working with organization, third party. So we have independent as a signatory of the Wood Buffalo Declaration. You should understand what independence means from and.
Well, I can see I've gotten under the minister's skin, but you've got $3.5 million that you're spending on restricting free speech. And all of those quotes that I just read to you were either from the WHO or the Minister of Health. So if those completely wrong, misleading statements that potentially had tremendous impacts on the Canadian economy and the health of Canadians came from the government, who watches the watchmen, boss?
I would point out that you are alleging that these statements are false.
Well, do you actually think that there's no human-to-human transmission of coronavirus, or that border measures don't work? Is that what you're alleging?
All I said is that the allegation came from you.
They are false. They're false statements.
They didn't come from these organizations, is what I'm saying.
No, they did come from these organizations, Minister. The WHO put that out
They did not
on
come
March
from
the
la
13th.
Société de l'Acadie du Nouveau-Brunswick, la Fédération Professionnelle.
The Federal Profession of Quebec Journalists.
Citizenship.
And that is all the
they're
time
now
for
in
that
charge
round.
of what coronavirus information is?
MP Rempel Garner, that is the end of that round. Our next 5-minute round of questions goes to MP Hutchings, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, thank you for being with me tonight. I too live in a province that culture and heritage and tradition is very strong and important here on the East Coast and my riding with the Long Range Mountains in Newfoundland and Labrador. So we too, as all Canadians, recognize how important arts and culture and sports and heritage are important in the lives of our artists, creators, and our athletes. And they keep us united more than ever. Can you bring us up to date on some of the measures that you're doing to support them through this COVID crisis?
So there's a number of things we've done very early on when the crisis started. One of the things that Heritage Canada and same with the Canada Council for the Arts announced is that we would honor our existing agreements with organizations for events that were planned, whether or not these events took place. And what we told organization within reason, they could use the funds from the federal government to compensate some of the losses related to COVID-19. We have accelerated the deployment of existing programs, and what we've worked really, what we wanted to make sure is that broader economic measures that were adopted by the federal government would be accessible for arts, cultural, and sports or organization. We wanted to make sure that if an author receives a copyright checks, it doesn't disqualify him from being able to apply to the CERB. And as an author myself and someone who receives very small copyright checks every now and then from my editor, it's never for money you've made in the last 14 days. It's money you made 6 months, a year and a half ago. So we made sure that the more economy-wide programs we had were well adjusted and adapted to the arts and culture sector. And on top of that, we've announced this $500 million emergency aid package to help where more help is needed.
Great. Minister, many organizations in my riding reach out as they know, as on all across the country, they're facing great uncertainty. Are their festival, is their event going to be, if it's canceled, are they going to lose their funding? I think you've indicated that you're going to accept and look after them. But at this time, are you going to accept when the new round of funding comes open? Will you be accepting new applications?
Absolutely.
And another question for you, Minister. I've had many questions from groups, especially from musicians, that they had a cultural festival. Would their funding be able to help them if they wanted to move, if their event is canceled due to COVID-19, would they be able to move and use that funding to help them do a virtual event?
So the answer to your first question, and I almost interrupted you, my apologies, is yes, absolutely. Our programs are going ahead. Grants and contributions are continuing to happen within Canadian Heritage. And the second part of your question, the answer is yes. One of the things we are doing is to show the maximum of flexibility we can in with our current programs, because they weren't designed for COVID-19 pandemic. So we have to adapt them as quickly as possible and give the flexibility our partner organization needs to be able to make it through this crisis.
Great. Thank you, Minister. And don't worry about interrupting me. I speak a little too fastly to another tradition of the East Coast. Minister, it's so important this time that people get their information from a reputable source. We've all heard of fake news. What advice do you give Canadians to make sure that the information that they are getting on COVID-19 and what they need to do and what they should be doing and where they should be going, what advice do you give to Canadians to make sure that it is accurate?
Well, I mean, if there is one piece of advice I would give Canadians, go to trusted news information. Go to your local, regional, provincial, and federal healthcare agencies to get the best possible information. I mean, we've seen all sorts of things on the web, and unfortunately, many of them misleading or simply wrong regarding COVID-19. So it's important that people verify the source and verify the information that they're getting.
That's great.
Just like
Thank
the
you
doctors,
so much.
I guess, get a second opinion.
That's right. Thank you so much, Minister. Madam Chair, thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup. Donc,
Thank you. The next round is for Mr. Lemire. You have 2.5 minutes. Oh, thank you. First of all, I would like to mention that I would like to say that Minister Monsef had to leave before the end of the meeting. But I'll go ahead with my question for the remaining minister. $150 million for the broadband and a total budget of $2.6 billion for Canadian connectivity. Now, in terms of the monies that are there, how far are they advancing on public monies? I would like to thank the Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue for his question, Madam Chair. But unfortunately, I certainly would be very happy to follow up on that question with my colleagues Baines and Ms. Monsef, but this doesn't fall under Canadian heritage. The Deputy Minister is present. Perhaps the Deputy Minister could answer my question. In the finance report, when they talk about building something better for Canada, from the 2016 program for connectivity, there were large amounts of monies that were set aside and earmarked and spent by the Canadian government. Is there new money, though, that is being added to what already existed? And are we going to be able to get to that figure of $1 billion that is required for connectivity, or will that require further investment? Once again, Madam Chair, I cannot answer this question. I don't know if the Deputy Minister is still online. If the Deputy Minister would be able to answer the question, perhaps? Yes, I'm ready to answer the question, Madam Chair. I think that the amount shared with the private sector depends on the project, because there are some projects where it would be more difficult for the private industries to invest because it's far away from their networks. But for I don't know what the French is for Connect Innovate, the newest program. It's $1 from the private sector, $1 from the public sector, the government. And if there are technical details that the honourable member would like to obtain, I would be able to follow up on that. In the first part, the minister mentioned that she would be able to answer certain questions, but perhaps there could be some follow-up. Madam Chair, that's all your time, unfortunately, Mr. Malil. The next round of questions is Mr. Massey, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Guilbeault, and this continues my questioning with regards to your cabinet decision. You're aware that you raised $3.47 million in spectrum auction since you've been elected and you were at cabinet. You're scheduled budgeted to spend $170 million of that for connectivity to Canada. And at the same time, you're going to be spending significantly right now for arts and culture in Canada, including important connections to communities like mine, with over 300 years of Francophone culture connection that we're extremely proud of. And we are also faced with the United States, giving us a bombardment of a number of media sources. So what do you say to those Canadians that have to wait for another 10 years for connectivity when your government is pocketing the lion's share of $3.47 billion in spectrum auction that you received, and at the same time, you're going to be rolling out programs for arts and culture in Canada that will have to wait for the good majority of Canadians in rural and remote areas, and in some areas very expensive to actually access because the rates are so high. Why is that acceptable?
I thank the member from Windsor West for his question, Madam Chair. As Heritage Minister, I cannot answer that question. I believe Deputy Minister Kennedy is still.
You were at the cabinet table.
Call.
You were at the cabinet table. You made that decision with cabinet. You still have the lion's share of the $3.47 billion that came in available to you and cabinet to redirect towards the internet services right now. Why can't that be a solution? Why do you have to wait on bended knee for private investment when we have $20 billion historically invested from the private sector, and then we have just recently, with your tenure, $3.47 billion alone from the previous spectrum auction that you were part of, and another spectrum coming up right now? Why do we have to wait? What is wrong at cabinet to actually roll these things out? Why do you need a private sector to do the arts and culture spread across this country you could do immediately?
I would like to remind the member from Windsor West that we are investing $6 billion in the deployment of the network.
You're waiting for private funds to be part of that, and you have other access to capital. So why wait? Why not deploy that capital now?
Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for that, and that completes our third round. So with that, I know that we also have some of our officials with us, and we still have about 12 minutes remaining in meeting time. So what I can do is I can start another fourth round. And with that, I just would need to get an indication from the Conservatives who would like the first 5-minute round.
Madam Chair, I must leave. I could stay on a bit longer, but unfortunately, I can no longer.
Thank you very much, Minister. You were scheduled to be here for 90 minutes, and you've actually stayed for much longer than that. So I want to thank you again for being here. And I know that we have your officials with us as well that can continue to answer questions. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
MP Rempel-Garner, are you going to be taking this round? I saw you were unmuted.
Yeah, I was just going to say Mr. Pastor will be taking this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. MP Pastor, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, but I guess I'm going to go to Mr. Kennedy here for some questions here. Mr. Kennedy, I'm just wondering if you would be able to give us a definition of what rural means.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I think it would depend very much, certainly as a public servant, it would depend on the program you're referring to. Typically, for example, on our broadband programming, we would have a definition of whether something is urban or ex-urban or rural, but that may well differ depending on whether it's another government program in another ministry. If you like, I could give an explanation of how that works in, say, our broadband programming. We have Mike
quickly
on the phone who could speak to that. Yeah, maybe if Eric Dagenet could be, if his microphone could be turned on, just to talk a little bit about how we work with the telcos to kind of ensure that we get build out into rural areas. I don't know if Eric is available on the line.
Yeah, I just want a quick description of what rural would be for the context of broadband, just really quick.
Sure.
So in the context of spectrum auctions, when we sell the
spectrum, Eric, you got to speak more loudly. You're very, very faint.
When we sell the spectrum to telcos through auctions, we have deployment conditions, which mean that the telcos actually have to deploy the spectrum they buy. So they have to serve the rural areas in the tiers that they buy. So basically, the government puts as a condition of the sale of spectrum, a condition that the telcos will deploy and serve rural customers.
But what's the definition for rural?
So what we do is we say you have to serve 90, 95, 97% of the territory, the tier. And so what that ends up doing is you end up having to serve the people in that tier. So we don't actually have a definition of rural. We just say that we put a condition on the percentage of the geography that they have to serve and the people they have to serve.
Okay, because I'm just, the reason why I'm wondering, so like right now I'm sitting in the city of Swift Current. We're just shy of 20,000 people. By a lot of definitions, Swift Current is considered a rural community. There are, within my riding, there are close to 140 communities in my riding, the vast majority of which would be under 1,000 people. There are only, I'm going to say about 5 or 6 communities that are over 1,000 people anyway. So it's the vast majority of the people live in my riding live on farms, acreages, or live in communities that, like the one that I grew up in, or I grew up on a farm by a community that was under 300 people. My concern is that if, when we're talking about connecting rural broadband, that the metrics can be skewed to say, oh, the city of Swift Current has 50 and 10, so therefore that falls into the 37% of communities that are connected already. Or we can be using those numbers to pad. I'm just concerned about that.
Okay, so sorry, I was talking about spectrum auctions. If you're talking about like the Connect to Innovate program, smaller communities, so basically if a community had fewer than 30,000 people, they were eligible and they had to be further than 2 kilometers away from a fiber point of presence. So that's how we defined rural for the purposes of the Connect to Innovate. I was talking about spectrum auctions, which I thought was the question.
Okay, no, that's fair. I'm looking for broadband here, and when we were talking about track records of governments connecting broadband back in between 2012 and 2015, I was working as an installer for a telecommunications company in an area that had 3 First Nations on it, and I was under the Harper government's time, and I was an installer that did some of the first connections on First Nations to ensure that they had a fixed wired internet solution, not wireless, not relying on wireless technology, which is unreliable, which seems to be the direction that we are going with a lot of this rural broadband announcements here. And especially when we're looking to get to 50 and 10, how are we going to then ensure that all of these areas that are less than 1,000 or even greater than 1,000, how are they going to actually be able to achieve 50 and 10?
That's going to be a decision that's going to be made as we look at the proposals that come in project by project to make sure that they can meet that specification. But there may be some where it's going to be, it'll be fiber optic. There may be some where it'll be, fixed wireless. It really will depend on the project. And that's the sort of thing we will look at when we're evaluating the proposals that come in. But certainly the objective of making sure we hit 50-10 is kind of front and center.
Thank you so much. That's the end of that round of questions. The next 5-minute round goes to Lloyd Longfield. You have 5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll be splitting my time with MP Hutchings. To continue on with Mr. Kennedy, in our part of Ontario, we've been working with the municipalities, with the Western Wardens Caucus, looking at the SWIFT project and the need to combine efforts with the small rural communities and the provinces in which they reside, and with the federal government. With COVID-19, some of the equations might change. Municipalities might be strapped for cash, or provinces may not be at the table. Have we taken any steps in terms of modeling going forward from the federal government?
I could maybe turn to Eric Dagenet to answer, kind of get into the technical detail. But I think when the new program opens, which I think the ministers have indicated will be wanting to move forward quickly, I think we're going to see very, very rapidly kind of what kinds of proposals come in and what kind of financing capability the various parties can bring to the table. And obviously, I think we're going to want to be very responsive to the reality on the ground. I think that's obviously circumstances may well have changed with COVID-19. I'm not sure if my staff. I realize there's limited time, but if we wanted to get deeper into the question, I could ask my staff to speak to that.
Yeah, and it's maybe, I don't want your staff to have to speculate, but I think it's just fair enough to say that we have some work to do in terms of how we evaluate going forward. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Hutchings, if that's okay, unless you needed to comment on my comment.
Okay, Mr. Kenny, my question's for you too, just continuing on the vein of broadband. I think we're all in agreement that urgency is a prerequisite. We understand, as the minister said, this is related to the railway going in, how the importance of connectivity. So I've just two quick questions for you. Can you give me your comments on where you think we can use passive infrastructure in advancing to these small rural communities? I too am like my colleague Patzer. I've got over 200 communities, probably of 1,000 people and under. So, if there is passive infrastructure, can we use that? And what other interim measures is the department looking at to ensure that we get people connected as quickly as possible, especially in the era of where it's safety is, and we have communities with no communication now at all? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm so sorry. My internet I missed the front end of the question. I think there was a question about use of passive infrastructure. I would say that is something that we're very alive to. I think the Janet Yale's panel actually mentioned this as an issue, that the panel that came out maybe 2 months ago, and certainly you want to take advantage where you can of passive infrastructure, because that's an efficient way to kind of make sure that you can make broadband available. The CRTC is currently reviewing access, for example, to telephone poles. So there's already a proceeding being run by the CRTC. So that is an area that I think we're very alive to, just to assure the member of that. In terms of in the short term, we obviously want to do everything we can to support the availability of data and voice services to Canadians. And there's a lot of work that's being done with the telcos to try to ensure that people have access during the crisis period. I'm not sure if that was the question, but that's what
it was. I was wondering if you're
with a bit.
Yes, what you're looking at in interim measures that could help communities that have no accessibility either with broadband or cell right now.
Well, I think the first thing is we want to make sure that that when the program is up and running, we go as quickly as possible. And so I think that's kind of an aim will be to try to roll out the new funding under the Universal Broadband Program as rapidly as we can. So that's certainly a priority. And then in terms of the existing network, there's a lot of work that the telcos are doing to expand the availability of their networks, add additional capacity so that it can kind of hold up to the traffic. There's been a huge increase in voice traffic and data traffic and so on. And there's some things we've done with them in terms of delaying payment of fees, accelerating the transfer of licenses. So with companies when one company has some spectrum they can't use and another company can use it, to kind of speed up those transfers so that they can balance the load and actually more efficiently serve customers during the crisis. So there's things we're doing now, even with the existing infrastructure behind the scenes.
And just to clue up, Mr. Kennedy,
when the new program launches, yes.
Yeah,
sorry.
I was just going to say, the minister made reference to some changes that we made in CTI that you're going to see in UBF. Can you just give us a couple of examples of how we've made the UBF better going forward in the application process and in?
Yeah. So, unfortunately, that actually wraps up our time for this evening. But I'd like to thank everyone for being here and helping us along the way in this study for the response on COVID-19. Again, our next meeting is on Thursday from 5 to 7 p.m. And with that, I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Good
night.